All right, and we're live. So, welcome everybody to Talking is a Free Action, the D&D podcast, where you get to listen to myself and Marvin ramble ad nauseum about D&D and Dungeons and Dragons and DMing and stuff. I am Owen. I am one of your hosts. I'm joined today with my co-host Marvin,
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
and we have a special guest today, Andrew. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
Not bad, man. Not bad. Welcome to the show.
I'm glad to be here. I've been saying forever that Owen needs to have a podcast. I mean D&D suits him very well, but more specifically, I've been wanting to hear him just rant about how much he hates Subway on a podcast.
Oh
So
boy, you
hopefully
should
one
watch
day we
his.
get that.
You should watch his streams when he's playing video games.
It's
Do
basically
you
all I
rant?
do.
Is just rant about how much he hates Subway whilst playing video games.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
One Among Us stream. He roped the rest of us into the Subway conversation.
Yeah.
It turns out some people like their rotisserie chicken.
It was the most lukewarm
What?
defense of their rotisserie chicken, and I basically brought the entire game to a standstill to climb up on a soapbox and demand that I get ejected from the ship.
Okay,
It's
you didn't demand to be ejected.
I basically
demanded
did.
you be ejected.
I
what
basically
is
did.
what is the thing with Among Us again? Like, there's one person that what do they call that thing again? I can't. You're trying to prove that
The
you're not
imposter.
the imposter. Yeah, so pretty much Owen's like, yeah, I'm not the imposter. Also, you know what else I hate about Subway?
Yeah, that was basically it. He was like, everybody stop playing the game.
Emergency
all right?
meeting.
Stop playing the game. I'm here to talk about Subway. And I was like, I really hope he's the imposter because I'm voting him out right now.
Yeah. It was a riot.
Um,
But you can check those replays on YouTube. I upload all of them.
oh hell yeah!
I'll find the particular one. I think it was the last one that I uploaded. But I'll
It was
double
either
check.
that one or the second to last one.
Yeah. So, let me turn the light. Hey, what do you know? Okay. So today is going to be a little bit of a different kind of show. We thought that it would be fun to bring Andrew on board. Andrew, as it turns out, we've talked about you a little bit on the podcast before, since you're relatively new to the game, and that's where a lot of people find themselves interacting with D&D. So we'd figured that we'd, kind of ask you a little bit about your journey with the game and kind of your thoughts, opinions, observations, and kind of what you think about it, um, and
Yeah,
whatnot.
that sounds like fun to me. Hopefully, good things have been mentioned in passing.
For the most
Overwhelmingly
part.
positive, I would say. Um,
Better than some of our other friends. Let's
Yep.
put it that way.
who we
All right. Well,
occasionally rib.
I'm not gonna name any names, but I feel like I might know who.
They'll
who
know who
could-
they are.
Yeah.
To be fair, I have named their names. Everybody who's watching probably already knows who I'm talking about.
Yeah. That being said, we're not gonna spend 2 hours, tearing our friends down. We'll rib them a bit though.
Sure.
So, Andrew, this is something I guess I've been kind of meaning to ask you for a while now. Did you know anything about Dungeons and Dragons prior to me inviting you to play?
Not the slightest clue. So here's the thing. I remember you texted my brother and I saying uh, like hosting some Dungeons and Dragons this Sunday or something like that. I remember we got that text, and both him and I were like, "What the hell is Dungeons and Dragons?" And so we were like, Owen's always been such a good friend to us. He's always supportive to everything that we're doing. Let's like, we don't know what it is. It doesn't really sound like something that might be our cup of tea, but let's show up, play a few rounds. We had no idea what the hell we were doing. So we're like, we'll play a few rounds and then, call it a day. And then so we show up and you're like, all right, so you got to create a character, create the entire backstory of this character, and we're going to be playing this for a long time. I was like, oh, what the hell did I just get myself into?
Yeah, I maybe leaned on the idea that you maybe knew what it was prior to accepting. I think sometimes I take for granted that not everybody has the same background that I do in gaming. Because a lot of the new people I tend to meet usually already know what it is, or they're a total normie. So so what was that like?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I feel like it was I was confused. I really had no idea what to do, and I remember
That sounds awful.
that just that first session that we had, you just like created this like scenario, and you're like, what do you do? I'm like, what the hell do you mean, what do I do? I don't know what I do. So it was it took some getting used to. It was fun creating the character that like once I knew the what the boundaries were and what I had to do and yada yada, it was fun creating the character. It took some used to getting used to the game. I feel like I'm still getting used to the game because sometimes you'll ask me like, oh, what's your like spell save DC, I think it is, and I'm like,
Mm.
I don't know what you're talking about. so uh so yeah, there's still some things that like I'm still probably a total noob with, but yeah, initially getting involved in it took some getting used to, but ultimately I think it was a fun time.
Nice.
Yeah. What was it like for you guys getting involved, like doing it for the first time?
You want to take that one, Vern?
Yeah, I'll go first. So I actually knew something about D&D before I played, and I had actually seen people playing, so I knew the basic concept and how it worked before I played. So for me, it wasn't anything like weird or jarring, and I kind of had a vague idea of what a lot of the terminology meant. And I'd been a fan of fantasy and high magic stuff for basically my whole life, anyways. So like wizards, like classic for me. I was like, oh, I can just be a sorcerer. That's really cool. Um, this already makes sense, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and it didn't take me long. I built my character in like half an hour. Um, didn't have a backstory to speak of because we were like 14, 15 at the time. Bastion in chat was actually my first DM. Um, so like we just kind of went. It was super bare bones adventure and we had a good time.
It sounds like it. How many do you know how many different like campaigns you've played until this point?
Ooh, that is let me
Hard
think.
question.
Give me a couple minutes to like add them up.
While he's doing the arithmetic there, I think that's one thing that's kind of interesting as far as like a difference in that I think Marvin and I entered the game with a lot more familiar with like the fantasy vocabulary than I think you struck me as.
That's
So
fair.
so like for a lot of it, it was a little bit easier to kind of broad strokes understand what the game was trying to communicate. I think for me as a DM at least, like one of your challenges whenever you're trying to get somebody totally new into the game is trying to not get bogged down too much with the rules and really kind of getting them kind of up and excited to like play their character, um, which I hope I did. But I know that like walking away from that first session, I'm sure that was really daunting. Like
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, I think I mean I still am excited to play my character, and we've been doing this campaign for like nearly 4 years now, so I think you did a good job roping me in there, but yeah, I don't know if I was I know my brother obviously was new to it as well. He's not with the campaign anymore, but I don't know if Nick or Alex or any of them had played or never played before either. They did seem more comfortable with it than I was.
so Nick and Alex. So Alex, to my understanding, had played a couple of times before. Nick had never played before, but he had watched all of season one of Critical Role, which is like a D&D show where professional voice actors play Dungeons and Dragons for for amusement and cash
Okay.
bucks. So I know that he was familiar with the game at the very least, even though he had never personally played.
That's fair. And again, same to like what you guys said with getting started yourselves is he strikes me as somebody that would be more familiar with like fantasy and that kind of thing.
Mhm.
So that makes sense. But so ultimately, it was just a bunch of newbies that you started this campaign with, which is got to be interesting from your perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Marvin, did you get a number there?
Um, just D&D, I think I'm like 30 or so, give or take. Um, but for like D&D and all of the other systems I've played, I couldn't even begin to count that.
And I take it that not all of those campaigns have taken the 4 years and counting that our campaign has taken as well either.
No, no.
Okay.
A couple of them have, but the vast majority were a few sessions, couple months maybe.
I can't even like again because this was a new thing for me and this is the only campaign I've played. Like I can't even imagine what like a couple session like uh campaign would be like.
Yeah, I figured that might surprise you to know, but like most people when they play D&D, it usually doesn't go past like 3 to 5 sessions.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. So
Uh,
what is
those
what is
those long form campaigns are actually pretty rare.
okay. So
Yep.
what does that usually entail? It's just like there are a couple different characters, you might fight a couple of monsters, and then that's the end of it.
Uh, I mean, it kind of depends on what the DM is doing, but like I think the easiest way to imagine it is like a whole campaign might be just like one of the instances that we've had where like you guys would travel to a new town, you'd find that something was wrong with the town, you'd solve the problem, fight the monster, or save the day. So like anytime that you
Okay.
guys have like arrived at a new town and did a new thing there, particularly like the early campaign, each one of those could have been its own story unto itself. The only thing that kept it a continuation is that I made an effort to make sure that there was some through line as far as like story beats are concerned, and you guys were playing the same characters, but just as easily you could have rolled up completely new characters each time, and that would have been probably similar to a lot of other people's experience with the game.
Interesting. And did you when you started our campaign, did you know that it was going to be one of these like long-term ones, or were you meaning for it to be one of the shorter ones?
I mean, I certainly hoped that it would be a long-term session. I think that, in that case, it was me kind of restarting my D&D group because prior to that, I had DM'd for Marvin and a bunch of other people back here in Florida for a really long time. And so when I had started the new group, I had hoped that enough of you guys would be interested in continuing and having fun with it that I'd be able to run something a little bit more long term because for me, it's one of the ways that I socialize with my friends. And so, like, I like it not only as a game to play, but it gives me both a creative outlet as well as just an excuse to meet up with my friends and talk and hang out with them for like an hour and a half, which is,
That's fair.
or like 3 hours or whatever it is. Um, and I think that's something you can never really be short on is excuses to meet up with people.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's
That's
too
totally fair.
true. And I actually use it in much the same way. Um, my last session actually we didn't start playing the campaign I run. My last session we didn't start playing until like 2 hours after we got here. We were just hanging out, catching up, eating food.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's
So
definitely it's always seemed to be a fun spot to do that. So you
mhm.
also DM a campaign as well, Marvin?
Yes, sir. My game runs every other Sunday, and early in my time with Owen's campaign, that's actually one of the reasons we like move days around sometimes because my campaign is significantly less flexible with when people can play.
Okay.
Yeah, so, and that's just one of those things, right? Like sometimes you get lucky and you have a bunch of people who are really interested to play and also have set schedules, which is kind of the place that our campaign's in.
Yep.
So we're pretty fortunate in that we can afford to run a weekly session, whereas I've definitely had campaigns in the past that I've run where I had to take a 2-month break because I couldn't coordinate everybody to arrive on time.
Yeah,
I was there for that.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
that's happened a couple of times with our campaign as well. I don't think that we necessarily have gone like 2 months, but there have been times where we've needed
It was
to
like a
take like
3-week
a
break or
3 week.
something.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
I mean, that was fairly recent, right around December, right? We just had a 3-week break.
yeah. And it wasn't even that. I mean, obviously within a 4-year campaign, like there's going to be those times as well. Like we haven't been totally like consistent, but we've been very like more consistent than not, certainly.
Hmm. Yeah,
Like I
and
was telling Nick the other day, imagine living where you have to wait 2 weeks between every session.
Yeah, at least. Yeah. When before the pandemic happened with my old job, there was a while for like, or no. Actually, during the summer when I was delivering for Naked City, I was working on Saturdays, so there was a while like where I just wasn't able to join in on campaigns. I think it was like a month or two
it was quite a while. You
over the
missed quite a
summer.
bit.
Yeah.
I think it might have even been longer. I think
It was like
it was a
2 to 3
while.
months. It was like the
Yeah.
entire summer.
And then I got a big boy job. And I still work on Saturdays just at night, so I can play D&D during the day.
Yeah, which works out, right?
Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious, because like in my opinion, I think that one of the reasons I really love playing with new players is that they're really kind of unhindered by preconceived notions on what characters and classes should be doing. Um, so if I can kind of take you to the Wayback Machine when you first were creating your first character, um, I know that of course I helped guide you through that, but what was kind of your thoughts in like the character creation process? Because I know ultimately we ended up with a pretty interesting concept for your bard character.
Yeah. Well, my bard character is essentially just who I wish I could be, almost. Uh, so he's just this British rock star, kind of a big deal in his home country, fashionista, you know, does well with the ladies. So he's yeah, he's just like all that. He embodies a lot of like cool things that I'm interested in my personal life. So yeah, once like the idea of like creating a character came uh to my attention, and it's like, yeah, it's 100% possible for your character to be like that. I'm like, great, that's essentially that's what I'm gonna make. So that's why like I'd struggle, like, and I think I'd struggle in the future making a different character, because this character is very close to home. So I like creating something from the ground up, that because that idea is already taken, so I can't just like create a new character to be similar to the character I already have. Like that just wouldn't make any sense. Um so yeah, it's an interesting thing. I think it's going to be a little bit more interesting the second time around. Again, because of preconceived ideas, but also the fact that I just created a character to be something that I'm already interested in. Um, I think that I know for a while, especially towards the beginning, because my character, he's a bard, but he uses a lot of spells to attack and just do a lot of different things. So I don't think I was totally playing him like what a lot of people would expect a bard to be or whatever. And I remember you saying like when we were moving up in levels, like, hey, maybe you want to take a class in wizard or something. You like doing spells. So yeah, I don't think that I necessarily am playing a bard the way a lot of people would play a bard. But again, I think that just kind of is a result of me not really having any familiarity with the game before this.
Yeah, that's really interesting because like I mean it's true. One thing I will say is like the class that you picked is is one of the more versatile ones. So you could probably sample 100 different bards and you'll probably get 100 different versions of that class.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I mean, definitely, you leaned more into like the magic side of it, just because I think it was more obvious, I guess. It's like, well,
Yeah.
how do I attack? It's like, well, you have an attacking spell, so you could do that if you'd like, and that was usually a pretty safe option. Um,
Yeah, I think that, and the fact that like my character's strength score is so low, and he he can take because he's this cool guy that's supposed to dress really well, so he has like no armor, so his AC is low. So I think the fact that I can just take so much damage, and I could just simply use spells to attack from afar, I think that that's ultimately how that came into play. And like my first cantrip was Firebolt, and I'm like, oh, this is cool. So I just want to do more things like that.
I'm here for it.
Yeah,
I'm a huge fan of playing classes in unconventional ways, and I had never seen Fireball Bard before. I
really.
loved it. Yeah, I've literally never seen somebody go, "Yeah, I'm a bard, and the thing I do most is throw fire at people."
Yeah, that's. Uh, I think we were talking about this before we went live, but it's. Yeah, that's pretty much all that I'm good for in combat is my use of fire, and at times Owen will just give us monsters and creatures that are totally fire immune, and that's where my creature is, or my character is more or less useless to the party. Uh, so it's funny, and I think that I'm able to do quite a bit of damage while that works to my advantage. But once it doesn't work to my advantage, I'm just kind of like staying there trying not to die.
You and me both, man.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in a lot of ways it's the same for Marvin's character in this particular campaign too, since his primary offense is lightning based. So, like, heaven forbid you fight a lightning absorbing enemy or something. Um,
Yeah,
In
so,
that case, I only have one option.
yeah, not lightning. Um, so, I mean, certainly playing the game like during the combat sections of it is one thing, but I think that the role play aspect of the game is also a big attractor. For you, what is it that kind of drew you to the game more? Was it more the like combat part of the game, or did you really more latch on to the role playing aspect of it?
I think it took me a little while to come into my own with the role playing
Hmm.
part of it. At first, especially because our campaign literally started with combat. So I think that combat was I caught on a little quicker with that, and it's just like combat's just fun. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I very much like each part of the game, but it took me a little while to I guess figure out um and explore the realm of role playing. Like again, my character is based off of like British culture, so he has an accent, but I didn't start like role playing with that accent until a little ways into the game. Because it finally made sense to me, and it finally occurred like, oh yeah, that's I should do that. So so the role playing part is a lot of fun, and I think that it's fun for me because I can do ridiculous things with my character, and I think that I can personally get away with it in the party because it's just my character, and I think sometimes some of the things that my character says or does, it might really piss other people off if it was another character doing that, but I think that I can get away with it with my character. So so yeah, that is a lot of fun, but also just the stress of combat almost every time we go into combat is quite fun as well.
Yeah, I guess definitely if it's a nail biter.
Yeah, I mean, uh, as fantastic of a DM as you are, you definitely try to kill us every opportunity you get. So
I think that's an
it's
unfair characterization of my DMing style.
Well, maybe if people didn't almost die like every session, they wouldn't think that.
I like to think that I treat you guys fairly, if nothing else.
Yeah, no, you definitely do. Well, okay, I will say this: our very first session, my character actually should have died that very first session. He was like hanging. We had to jump across like a canyon pretty much, and everybody else made it, and my character like had to roll an athletics check, and I got like a 9, and then So Owen was nice enough to like have me hanging off the side of this cliff, and he was like, "Yeah, just roll like a strength check," and I rolled like a 4, and then and then and then
Shit.
Nick's character caught me, and he was like, okay, I want to pull him back up, and he was like, you roll a strength check, and then he rolled less than a 10, and then Owen was like nice enough. He was like, you pretty much like, what was that? Was that movie you always reference? I think Superman, where he like like with one arm
Oh,
pulls him over.
Batman, where
Yeah,
Batman Begins or whatever, where he like curls Ra's al Ghul or whatever.
yeah.
Oh, so good.
So Owen, after Nick rolled less than a 10 on a strength check, Owen was nice enough to keep my character alive, because generally the way we rolled, like I should have been dead that very first session. So no, he doesn't always try to kill us. It's a slight exaggeration, but
I think I
he
kind of
likes
tipped
to.
my hand a little bit, where it's like, no, I'm actually on your guys' side, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Well, sometimes there was that one session, I can't remember what we were fighting, but like it was taking over like different characters' minds. And so like you took over Nick's mind and had him start attacking everybody else in the party.
oh, that
That
was the
was
Elder
fun.
Brain.
Yeah, that was a good time.
Yeah, dominate person, real force multiplier. Also in chat, our friend KGB Bunny says that you don't get to talk until you've played in one of Dylan's campaigns. Who was a DM that we played with, who was particularly brutal to his players.
So he legitimately tries to kill his players.
I don't think we got more than like one win combat wise in some of those campaigns. Yeah, see there, Flink knows.
So what do you guys like?
He's in chat.
So what do you guys like level 2, and then
Oh no,
he
no,
tries
we
to
were high
like?
level. We were high level. It's just
Oh,
there was
okay.
always a bigger fish.
Always a bigger fish. We were saved by Deus Ex Machina more times than I can count.
I have to ask Owen,
Mm.
do you think that when we were debating fighting that black dragon, do you honestly think we had a chance against it?
Do you want the honest answer, or do you want the answer that I'm going to tell you because you're my player and I need to keep up the facade?
I want the honest answer.
The honest answer is you weren't actually that far away from killing it outright based off of how much damage you did. It had
Oh
maybe
my
like
god.
130 HP left, based off of the rules as written. But as a DM, pretty often, if I find that the fight is either too easy or too hard, I have no problem putting my thumb on the scale if that's what it takes. So if it looked like the dragon was gonna die and it didn't feel like it was an appropriate like time for that to happen, because honestly, I don't think you guys should be able to just roll into a dragon's lair and just like kill it for fun. I definitely would have like tripled its HP or something if it was getting that
So
low.
you're saying I should roll into a dragon's lair and just kill it for fun. That's what you're telling me right now.
Uh, no, no. Well, no, no, probably not. But my point is that there are going to be times during the campaign as a DM where I do put my thumb on the scale one way or the other. Either radically changing the results so that way you guys have an advantage against the fight, not literally mechanical advantage, but like, cut HP, cut damage, have them make suboptimal plays, or I will, create artificial danger by introducing new elements to the fight, or increasing HP totals, increasing damage, providing, giving an extra attack or abilities, things like that. And I don't do it all the time, but during important fights, particularly ones that are, you could consider like boss monster type, threats. A lot of times I'm making a lot of adjustments to that fight on the fly, or at least I definitely did that more so when I was playing in paper, like live games. On Roll20, I do it less frequently, but I do still do it. So you had a 0% chance of ever killing that dragon, but if I played it rules as written, you would have probably killed it in another like 2 rounds. But you also could have easily just had two of your own party members die because all it takes is one breath weapon to go poorly and two of you guys are down.
Yeah, that's fair. So you do quite a bit of improvising then during the fight. Do you just do that during combat, or does that happen a lot just with the regular storyline? Because that was a question. Like, do you go into like a session knowing almost exactly what's going to happen, or do you just kind of have like different place markers that you put and kind of let the session go organically?
I know that I have a way that I do things. I'm interested in Marvin's take though, because the thing is that I've never actually played with Marvin as a DM, so I do want to hear how he handles it before I jump into how I do it.
So I have multiple ways I'll approach a session as a DM, depending on mostly how I'm feeling and how much I've prepared. And usually I'm feeling lazy and I've prepared nothing. So there's a whole lot of improvisation when I DM, like a lot of it. Um, Granted, when I have things prepared, I still have to improv anyways, but it's more I'm improving things that I didn't account for than I'm improvising the whole thing.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, for me, it's. I know that DMing has been like described as herding cats at times because one thing that you can always count on the players to do is not what you expected them to do. Um, So in that respect, I don't find it super helpful to spend time planning like the super minutia. What I tend to think about most of the time during the week is I tend to think about the broad strokes on where I want the plot to go, the overall destination, um, and then from there I'll think about the NPCs that you guys interact with and their motivations and how they want to get from point A to point B. So that way
Okay.
when you interact with those characters, because I don't know exactly how those conversations are going to go, and it's just as likely that you'll have a excellent RP moment as it will be that Nick might put his foot in his mouth. So given that's the case,
Might.
tend to I don't tend to no he does actually have the ability to like finesse conversations every once in a while. He just chooses not to most of the time. Um, so I think that for me, because of that aspect of the game, I learned fairly early on as a new DM that it's pretty fruitless to try and plan out every aspect of what the players can do or find. So instead, I just mostly improv 90% of it. I know the destination that I kind of want the players to go to, and I might plan for a couple of contingencies if that doesn't come to pass. But I do always try to keep track of what other NPCs are doing so that way should you run into them again or should you not go and do the thing, those things will still have consequences. Good, for instance, there's a whole ass demon contract conspiracy in the first town that you guys were in. You guys just left that to be as it is. I didn't drop the plot line. That stuff is still happening. If you go back, things have gotten exponentially worse.
That's funny.
So
So,
so like that's DMing in a way, at least the way that I do it is it's like kind of juggling in a way where you're keeping a lot of plates spinning. I mixed analogies there, but you get my point.
so, so then, like for another example, with going to the plane of Alara to rescue Debian, obviously it wouldn't have happened another way because I don't think Dustin would have been very happy if we didn't at least make an effort to try to save Debian. But if we just as a party decided to just not do that, like, could we have done that, or would you try to like hurt us in that direction anyways?
Mm, I think that if you guys decide that you didn't want to do it, I can't force you. Like in this case, in this particular instance, this is a quest that's being undertaken partially for meta reasons because, Dustin as a player wanted it to happen and thus contrived a reason for why his PC wanted that to happen. Um,
Right.
but if he didn't do that or he played his PC a little bit differently and didn't have a real motivation to go, you guys could have gone and done something else. It would have been really shitty for Devian, but like
Absolutely.
like
He
real
deserves
bad,
it.
real bad. And yeah, I think he would have deserved it. But I think that like I was okay with that as well. That being
Right.
said, because you've gone and done this thing, I'm not going to make it for nothing. So you will get valuable, either help or information or something from this endeavor because it's costed you a lot of resources, a lot of time, which in and of itself is really important given the context of the campaign. So I
A
think
lot
Right.
of
that
mental stability.
yeah, party dynamics have changed as a consequence of it, right? So I think that as a DM, if you're going to have those kind of things set up, where it's like this is an aspect of the quest that I didn't. Oh, hey Nick. Um, because this is an aspect of the quest where like you didn't have to do it, you want to make sure there's some reward for it because you don't want to like kick your players in their teeth, whenever they're trying
Right.
to do something. You don't want to punish people for experimenting.
That's fair. That's totally fair.
So go ahead.
Going back real quick to Andrew's story about his first session, Embor King in my chat says that's why rope is an important thing to have in adventurers pack.
Yeah, facts.
And unrelated, Black Frost 22 says he would like to hear about some things to do while stopping in towns besides taking a long rest.
Ooh. Interesting.
Andrew, I'll let you take it because
Yeah,
you're our guest.
I think we do quite a bit of dicking around and with stopping in towns. Honestly, I don't think that that we're ever really as productive as we could be when we stop in different towns as a group. But as far as my character goes, as a bard musician, I always try to like make it a point as a character to go around and see like what the music scene's like there, or what the art scene is like there, and because like on my character sheet I have popular by demand, I always try to make sure I find some place to perform or some inn to perform, because that makes it so that I don't have to pay for lodging, so that's very very helpful. But yeah, as far as my character goes, it's just pretty much trying to see like what the art scene's like, maybe what the fashion scene's like, and then um like trying to like my character tries to see how like he wants like how he could be a womanizer in this city opposed to the last one. Uh yeah, again, and I'm probably part of the reason why we're not very productive when we stop in different towns. But yeah, like I know Nick's character is like constantly just looking for different ways he can like find different spells or like make his weapons stronger, or what kind of potions we can find. Um and yeah, I don't know. If there's ever any conflict, I always like to see like what conflicts like in those cities. Owen's very good about just dropping random people having random problems in different towns that may or may not have had any big significance to like the major story, but it's always fun to see what can happen, interacting with those different like NPCs. Um, but yeah, no, we really could do a better job when we stop in different towns, I think.
See, I disagree. I think the time we spend in towns is so much more interesting than anything else we could be doing. Because
Or
we bring character with us as players who are playing our characters well. And I don't think we've actually been anywhere that we didn't affect the town itself in a major way. Like that one town in Kamigawa where they started a riot and then they remembered and sent assassins after us.
that's true. Yeah,
Like,
there was another town where like after nightfall there was you couldn't use magic, and
mhm.
this guy was the like lighting torches around the city, and Nick's like, "Here, let me help you with that," and then starts like shooting fire to light it. It
I think
summons
that was
like all
Marvin's
these
first
different.
session with us.
That
Yeah, I
was
think
my
so.
first session.
And then just summoned all these undead characters, and we like a few of us still didn't realize that it was the magic that was summoning these characters, so they were like using magic,
Made it
like
exponentially worse.
yeah, like magic to attack these characters, and like they just kept popping up and popping up. That was, I think that fight took almost that entire session, just because of how many of those undead characters we summoned.
Mhm.
So okay, well, so yeah, I think that we make an impact in a substantial way, usually not in a good way, but but
That's pretty common
again,
with players.
that's fair. Well, again, but I still think that even though we make an impact, an emphasis on usually not a good impact, doesn't mean that we're productive because, again, we're making a negative impact on different cities where we could have done something totally different. But I
But
mean,
we're having
that's
fun.
yeah, that's the fun in it. At the end of the day, like if we're having fun not being productive and destroying every city that we cross paths with, then yeah, I'm fine with that being the case if we're having fun doing that.
You had mentioned something a little bit earlier that I was kind of curious about because, like, as a DM, you're always trying to create like memorable moments, and sometimes like I can't know what sticks out to my players, and so that's why I like trying to communicate with you guys, like post game and pre game is really important. So you had mentioned that sometimes there are problems that may or may not be related to the plot. What are some of the like problems in those towns that really like stick out in your memory for like instances where it was like, oh yeah, I remember we helped that guy and it didn't matter to anything, but like we did that thing, or vice versa.
I think the town was called Riverside, where with the kid Joshua, we rescued his dad. I don't think that I ultimately I think that we just did that out of the kindness of our hearts because I don't I
It's like
this
the
was a
one
long
and
time
only
for
good thing you've ever done.
yeah really. So correct me if I'm wrong. Like I know that Joshua's dad tried to reward us for that, but like correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think that that actually really had any kind of impact on the campaign. Like I think that we could have just not done that and nothing really would have mattered. And I remember I still laugh at Nick for this. Within that town, like Nick for some reason threw a coin at Joshua and got kicked out of the lodge in the middle of like the
The
first snow.
only inn in town.
Yeah,
um,
Oh,
but
jeez.
yeah, no, like, am I wrong in saying that it really wouldn't have mattered one way or another if we chose to do that or chose not to do that?
oh man, that's kind of tough to say. I guess it matters in that like it does inform some of the character relations that ended up happening later on. Right, because remember, you guys had your first interaction with Captain Rowan during that like story
Yeah,
event, and that relationship with that NPC came up later on when you guys ended up in Port Albatross and had to interact with the Shipwrights Guild there because she was
that
a big player for that. And so you started on a negative footing with that group because they didn't like you because of what Nick did.
yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, you do a very good job at that. At making like there are a lot of things. It's very rare where I feel like we don't have like reoccurring instances or like a consequence for an instance like down the road. Again, like us fucking with Chance when we left. I think it was leaving Riverside, and we
Mhm.
were like he was trying to ride with us like in the carriage that we got. I remember that. So us screwing around with him like ended up having consequences later in Port Albatross and then into Bramble Branch. So so you do a really good job at that. Yeah, I think that's always a memorable thing. So like, I was just trying to be funny by casting a hold person spell on him because he was being an asshole, and then we ended up getting beat up in a pub in Port Albatross for that. um, so so yeah, those are always memorable things. I'm trying to think of what else. It's really I think it's really just kind of how our party absorbs the different instances that you put in front of us.
Mhm.
Um, but also like you put memorable instances in front of us, whether like regardless of how our party is going to react.
Yeah. I mean, I try my best. I think the thing that I always strive to is to try and ensure that like decisions feel like they have consequence to them. Not consequence in a negative connotation kind of way, but more that decisions matter for better or worse. And I think that it's a little bit harder now because you guys are interacting on like multiple different worlds at this point. But in the earlier sections of the story, trying to juggle those NPCs and making sure that those relationships come back up later on, even in small ways sometimes, right? Um, the interactions with like the rival, not rival, but like the other adventuring party that you guys interacted with Tweenie and Oscar and Tongarth, like every interaction that you've had with that party has impacted that group of NPCs in some significant way. Um, so just kind of making the world feel like it's alive is something that I always really kind of strive for.
Yeah, I definitely think that is something that you achieve within our game. It always feels alive. Like even I know a lot of times, especially with like my character, just the random interactions I'll have with random people. I know that you'll have to ad lib quite a bit, but but
I feel like you do it because you like getting a rise out of me.
I mean, yeah, it's not necessarily. I mean, yeah, at times kind of a rise out of you and just kind of the party, but
Oh, I
at
think I
times
just
like
figured it out. Your next
what
character should be a troll, a literal fucking troll.
a literal troll.
Anyways, I'm sorry. I just
Well, it's not only that, it's just like sometimes I am interested in just like if I interact in this way with just this random person, what does that mean for us and like is that like what's gonna happen? Like when we went into that cave and like the night before I told that like ogre girl like yeah, hey, we're gonna go like trying to find money in this cave, come with us, and they actually came with us.
that was a big
And
deal.
it was a big deal. And I feel bad because Ollie was kind of a dick to and she should have died, honestly.
Olga? Yeah,
She
for
honestly
sure.
Oh, poor
thankfully she didn't.
Olga.
Yeah, thankfully she didn't, and then Tweenie and Tungarth took them in.
But
Which
like
I'm
that
glad
came
and
up. Like it came up later, right? So like speaking to that group of NPCs, like your first interaction with Olga was like she was just like the barmaid and you were just kind of, showing off or whatever, invited her to come along. She came with, managed to live through the whole thing somehow, um, which like was not insignificant, mind you. Marvin, I know you weren't there for this, but like this was like a battle where there was like probably 15 or 16 undead at least, like in a courtyard that was like multiple levels with like skeleton archers and like very minimal cover and like animated armor inside this castle, and there was, I think, an explosion at some point that you caused.
yeah.
Honestly, it's really improbable that this commoner lived through any of it, but they did. They did, and so the other adventuring party is like, oh, she got a taste for adventuring, so that was her call to action. Were she another PC, that was her first fighter level, and so the next time you saw her, like she was a legitimate fighter, like she was somewhat competent. And if I remember, I think she died during the Elder Brain encounter, which was the next time that you saw her.
Oh, did she?
Yeah, because
Oh.
remember, she had died during that encounter, but then Devian brought her back to life. Because you found
Oh
one diamond in
yeah.
town.
Oh yeah. Yeah, man, that's great. So how often? Because there's no way that because I think that what started the initial encounter was all like we got to our first like big city. I think it was in Sequester actually.
Hmm.
I think we got to our first big city and Oliver was just trying to like find some place to perform in town, and that's when he met them. He was just like just trying to talk to like the few people that were in that like pub or whatever. So how often do we come across characters and we interact with them um like beyond the point of like, oh, this is just this random NPC, and to the point like, oh wow, now I actually kind of have to create a character for this person. There's no way that you thought like that when you were like, oh yeah, there's these
The
two.
barmaid.
There's this ogre in there, and that's who's in this bar right now. There's no way that you thought that person was going to have any significance later on.
No, much less that you would like spend significant resources like bringing them back to life. Um,
Right.
so yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of it just has to do with like player engagement. At the end of the day, you want the players to be invested in the things that they're doing and the characters they're talking to. So like if the characters really like an NPC, I'm gonna be more likely to use that NPC for stuff. You know,
Right.
you guys I think went to go talk to like Gilligan, the sword salesman or whatever. Like I think 3 times in Sequester before you guys finally left town.
Yeah.
Like he's a character I had to flesh out quite a bit because initially it was just like I want to find a really good sword salesman. It's like all right, and I just threw together an accent that did a number on my voice, and It's so rough. Like I honestly like had to write the guy out because I couldn't do it. Every night that I had to play that character for more than a minute or two, I lost my voice the following day.
Oh my god.
Oh,
And
It,
I think the
it was
reason we
rough.
interacted with him so much is we got such a kick out of that voice.
Yeah, I believe it. Cause like when you walk into a shop and you're like, oh, I want to fight, I want to talk to the blacksmith. Usually you're expecting like, oh, okay, I'm Thorin the blacksmith. I make the finest steel around. You're not expecting like, hey man, how's it going? Like, which is exactly what that was.
dude, bro, blacksmith, top tier.
It's what it was, man. And he was a bit of a charlatan too. I think I sold you like some swords that were just long swords, but you were convinced that they were like decent.
Oh wait, really?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. You know what? I remember when you were like, you were like, add a longsword to your list, and it's like, like this is
got
the
ripped off.
Yeah, it was like exactly what my other longsword did, except it was this
It was just
finely
fancy looking.
crafted. It was just fancy looking. Yeah, I remember, and I didn't question it because again, like that was early, like especially earlier on, and I didn't really know that much about the game yet. But I remember like looking at the like abilities that that sword had compared to the other longsword I already had, and I'm like, wait, this is essentially the same thing.
Yeah, it was.
Uh,
But the character was a good salesman. Um,
He was.
so I mean that's kind of what I mean. Um,
So what you're saying is that we need to roll perception checks more often to see if people are full of shit,
yes,
huh?
100%.
I mean honestly, you guys are really trusting. Despite being complete assholes to almost everybody that you meet, your characters trust everybody that they run into and never question ulterior motives for the longest time. Um, so like not to turn the podcast into too self-indulgent of a thing, but like kind of taking it back out a little bit and talking a little bit more in broad strokes. So it took a little while for you to kind of find your voice as Oliver the Bard. um if you were talking to somebody who was really new, what would be advice that you would give a player to like help find the voice for their character?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. I do tell people quite a bit, like talk to people quite a bit about our campaign, and some people have played before, some people haven't. I think it's just kind of creating a backstory that is detailed enough. Like I feel like I created a pretty detailed backstory for my character, so um, that set up a lot of what the future was for my character. Um, and just I guess creating something that you think you would enjoy. Again, like my character is kind of like he just personifies a lot of like what my interests are and a lot of like what I think it would be cool to be in real life. So yeah, I think just creating something that you can kind of relate to and something that would personally be fun for you. Um, so again, like I'm into a lot of like British music and culture and like their fashion sense and stuff like that. So my character embodies a lot of that. So um, when I'm trying to you literally speak as Oliver, like I think like, oh, I want to like sound like I'm a member of Oasis or something. Um, so again, yeah, I just think kind of taking an inspiration from different things and just creating a character that seems to fit the mold of something that you're interested in or could be interested in. So um, yeah, I think that that's the best advice I could give for that sort of thing.
Nice. All right.
Seems good. I like it.
Yeah,
Thank you, sir.
I guess in a lot of ways just kind of do the legwork early on and make sure that you're playing something that you want to play.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely think that's what it was. And again, like when we finally got to Bramble Branch, and this was my character's hometown, and now he can go back to being like a rock star sort of a thing. Like it was just again that was all because of the backstory I created for my character, and then um like I was already pretty invested in my character, but that like even got me more invested in my character because my character was literally home and surrounded by like all the things that he knew, and like Owen even like just kind of introduced different things like, oh, this was your best friend. Like I never wrote like about a best friend in the backstory, but it's like, oh yeah, I guess this is my best friend. This is my manager. So it was just it like it felt like home for my character, and it got me that much more invested in the game because I had a pretty like decent backstory.
Yeah, the emotional connection, once you feel that from your character's perspective, it goes a long way with getting you into the game.
Absolutely. Um, yeah, like even like so I remember after Devian killed the councilman um of my hometown, and then like sent our city or like our country into flames, and then Oliver was became like depressed. Like like I only played like that because I figured that's exactly how that character would react in that sort of scenario. And again, like early on into playing, like when we started the campaign, I probably would have never thought of acting that way. But once you firsthand kind of experience something that's near and dear to your character, and from your character's perspective, it changes a lot of things.
Yeah, I think that once you start to realize that you can make the delineation between how you would do something in a situation and how your character would do something in a situation, at that point you're starting to like approach the headspace that helps create some of those most believable characters that you can play both as a DM and as a player in a campaign. Um, and I find that like homecomings are really effective for helping with that sort of thing. Um,
Yeah,
Absolutely.
so
yeah, I would definitely agree. If you ever wanted to be an actor and that didn't work out for you, just play D&D, I would say.
I mean, a lot of the skills probably translate, right? Particularly if you're
You
into improv.
literally get the role of a lifetime.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
that's a
fair.
good one.
No, that's actually really solid. So one thing I kind of wanted to touch on because I know that it's come up a few different times, both with both of you guys. And Marvin, let me know how you run things for your D&D campaign. But obviously, as players and DMs, we can't outline every aspect of our lives, of our characters' lives prior to the start of the game. So there's a fair number of instances that come up where you end up making up something that fits into a backstory, and then as a player or as a PC or whatever, you have to just roll with it. Like, oh, my character already knows this. Like your manager, for instance, Andrew, right? Your
Right,
character, was in a band, so it stands to reason you would have a manager of that band, and you were successful, so it stands to reason you're probably very familiar with this person and friendly, if anything. So when you get to talk to that person for the first time as a player, it's a weird situation because you're trying to fill in for moments that have yet to be defined that have already happened.
right.
Um, and sometimes that's on the DM's end where we're making up stuff and you have to, play catch up. But I know that sometimes you've gone the other way too, where you've made up something in your backstory on the fly to kind of accentuate or add to a conversation and such like that. So I guess to kind of form this into a question, um, when you're doing that sort of thing, do you feel that that's like, I guess, how easily does that come to you? Do you ever like question whether it's appropriate to do that sort of thing?
Um, when it involves my character personally and not like nothing really to do with the party, I don't think that I question whether or not it's okay to do that because it literally only has an effect on my character and only my character. Um, I don't think I've ever done that, or have like yeah, I don't think I've done that where it would affect the party because I feel like that's a little bit out of my lane. But yeah, if it has to do with my character, I don't feel like I have a problem doing that, and I feel like I know how to do that. Like I have an idea of how to do that within reason, to where it's not just something totally crazy, like for example, oh, like my character's poor, but wait, he's rich in my backstory, sort of thing. Like I wouldn't just
And that kind of
do
did happen,
something.
didn't it? Right, where you got home, it's like, wait, do I have a house?
Yeah, exactly. I did think I remember asking that question. I was like, wait, yeah, do I have a place to live? Like, you have a place to live here. This is where you live. I'm like, oh yeah, thank you. Um, but
That definitely happened with Marvin too.
yeah, yeah, it did happen. I remember that. Marvin asked almost the exact same way. You're like, do I live anywhere here? um,
We did talk about where my character lived before he started adventuring. But we got there and I was like, is my apartment still here?
One way to find out.
And he was like, yeah. And I was like, okay. And then we got there and I was like, does my key still work?
It's like,
uh,
oh boy.
but yeah, to like cap off the question, I think if it has something to do with my character particularly and people that only my character have interacted with, such as like the character's best friend, the manager, yada yada, like people that would only have an impact on my character's story and not so much the party story. I don't think I have a problem like uh just kind of pulling things out of thin air and like, oh yeah, this has happened in my character's past, or like, you know, me and this character have had an interaction that you know is relevant in this situation now, sort of thing. So yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I don't think I would ever do that with when the whole entire party is at stake, though.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it leans into the idea that like D&D is a collaborative storytelling game, so it's not just on the DM to like kind of create that story. I think it's both players that are doing it. Marvin, I guess question for you. Um, as DMs, of course, and as players, like we're trying to encourage, our players to do that to some extent. So, what are some ways that you kind of prime players to be comfortable doing that sort of thing?
Uh, Honestly, sometimes I will just have NPCs straight up ask them questions like that. Like, like,
Just that
oh,
direct.
what were you doing when you like met up with these guys? You said you had a crazy story, your life was insane. Like, how did this meeting happen? And like, for instance, Alan's character was a gladiator
Mhm.
that, you know, got fired because he was supposed to throw a fight, and instead of killing him, they just said you don't work here anymore. And like, that last bit was made up on the spot. he was
Really?
he was a gladiator, that was his background. But like, the fired on the spot, the fired for not throwing a fight thing, that was just made up right there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's okay to do that. Like, I remember specifically like a conversation that like Nick and you had, Andrew, at one point, like right after Nick took his first sorcerer level, and he like asked you like, "Oh, well, how was your first time casting magic?" And like, I know you never thought about that before. I don't think anybody really thinks about that, because we're not playing Harry Potter the role playing game. So
Right.
For most of us, the magic was a part of our character before we started playing it. We're not going to think about, the first time a spell happened.
yeah, or like your interaction with magic. So, um, like as a DM, I was always really happy with that moment because it was a moment where like like my two players organically created a story that I didn't have anything to do with.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, I remember that question, but I don't remember how I answered how I had Oliver answer that question, because yeah, that really was something I had to pull out of thin air.
yeah, I think you had said that like you lit a bush on fire by mistake or something during, but that you were like formally taught how to do the thing. Um,
That
well,
I mean that would make sense for Oliver, considering how much shit he lights on fire still.
yeah, although honestly, it doesn't feel like it's that's what you're doing on purpose most of the time. Unlike a lot of other pyromaniac characters, I don't think your goal is to light things on fire as a concept. I think it's just a byproduct of like the magic you do.
Right. Well, there was that one time we were in that cave, and you were talking about it earlier, where um I started the fire in there. I remember, and that was only because like I was like, I want to be like an action movie, and I want to like somersault and take cover behind that and shoot a firebolt. And I rolled a natural one on that, and I caught the place on fire.
Eh. I mean, I should have
But,
known that this was going to happen because I think in the very first session you lit the cart on fire. So
Oh,
oh
Lord.
yeah, again, I had no idea what I was doing. I think what I was trying to do was catch that on fire because I think there was one like whatever we were fighting was inside there.
it was a
So I
goblin,
think I
yeah.
was just yeah, I think I was just trying to kill it by catching that thing on fire. It didn't occur to me like this is what we had been traveling in.
That's wonderful.
This is
That is
worse
wonderful.
than the time Alan burned down a boat we were sailing on.
Oh, Nick's done that too.
Oh, Nick.
It was great. But yeah, so I think I think that's part of like what makes D&D really novel though. Is sometimes like you'll do things and it doesn't like because you can do anything, it means that like there's kind of an infinite number of variables, like an infinite number of ways that things can turn out. So, like, I recall there was an instance where the party was fighting in a mine shaft, right? And like there was like the office or whatever, and there was like shadows that were attacking them. And I think he shot a firebolt into the office with all the wooden furniture in it, which then caught that on fire, which was fine until you realize that it's a mine shaft with minimal ventilation, and thus the entire place started to fill with smoke while you're still getting attacked by these shadow things. Um,
Oof.
So it's like, making a bad situation kind of worse. But I mean, like, you can't going into that session, I could never have foreseen that was going to happen, and I know that that wasn't what you thought was going to happen either. So
I feel like with our party, there's a lot of those situations where we do things not realizing how much of a bad idea it is until you bring to our attention after we did it that it was
some of
why
the
it was a bad idea.
consequences.
Yeah.
That's a lot of D&D, honestly. Just, oh
Yeah.
shit, we didn't think this through.
It's a lot of like kind of like gentle adjustment. It's like when you drive a car, right? Like you're not making like giant turns left and right a lot of the time. It's small adjustments here and there, to kind of stay on
Right.
the path. And I think that like DMing in a lot of ways is kind of like that, and like being a player, it's a lot like that too. And I know you had mentioned earlier, like how to go about like making your second character when your first one is kind of so close to your heart. I think that when it comes to character generation, you're on the right track in that it's really just most people when they play characters, it's just an aspect of themselves that they're kind of pushing that slider a little bit further in one direction than they would otherwise. So
Right.
I think that the answer for like who do you play next after you play your first character is pick another aspect of your personality and just put the slider up on that.
Yeah. I was thinking about it while I was saying that because I got hockey on and I'm like, man, I love hockey. I wonder if there's any way I could create like a hockey player kind of character in that world. Or like an athlete, I guess. But yeah, it would be interesting to see what we could explore in that sort of world, in the current world that we're in.
Yeah, and the short answer is you absolutely could play a hockey player. It's one of those things where it's like, does hockey exist in this world? I don't
Yeah,
know,
well,
but like it
that
could.
like yeah, I don't see why it couldn't. It's just one of those things. Like, does hockey exist? Well, I guess now it does.
That happens a lot.
Yeah,
�:𝐞𝐞 says hockey exists everywhere. This is true.
yeah. I mean, they do say hockey is for everyone, right? I guess why not D&D characters? That would be really, really interesting. I really
Except
wonder
for
what that
Knights
character.
fans. Hockey's apparently not for Knights fans.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm not with Knights fans. uh, I wonder what that character could even bring to the table, honestly, other than just than having a really high athletics role. I really wonder what that character could bring to the table.
Unrelated, but Flink in my chat says Knights fans don't actually know what hockey is.
They don't. They do. I didn't want to offend like any potential Knights fans we might have in this chat, but they don't.
They
No,
deserve
no,
it.
feel free to offend them.
Oh yeah.
So it's
I mean, I'm glad they're passionate about the team, but they don't know. They just don't know dick about the sport, dude.
I think that comes with time, but
Fair.
I think that like what your hockey player brings to the table, though, obviously, is being an athlete. You probably end up playing a physical class, so barbarian, fighter, paladin, even something like that. I'm imagining something like Casey from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Right.
Um,
Maybe instead of a traditional hockey stick, they have like a scythe as their weapon.
yeah, or just an actual hockey stick that you just call a club.
Right.
That works too.
Or a quarterstaff, even.
I mean, hey, Happy Gilmore used an actual hockey stick to play golf, so.
I mean, the guy had one heck of a slap shot, I'll tell you that.
One. What a movie, man.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that a lot of like character generation is kind of picking something that's personal to you and pushing that slider up. So like when I go to play a character for the first time, like my current character is like a female necromancer who's just kind of a bitch, and honestly that's just taking the part of my personality that's an antisocial asshole and just kind of pushing that up a little bit, and taking the sociable bits and just kind of dialing that back a little bit. So
What's your favorite part about DMing? I feel like this is a very broad question, but like, is it playing the NPCs? Is it creating the stories? Is it kind of just watching what you've made unfold? Like, what's your favorite part about DMing?
Ooh, let me take this one. Let me go first.
sure, man. Well, I kind of mulled it over.
My favorite part, absolutely 100%, is not having to do or say anything. When the players totally immerse themselves in the game and they are doing everything, they're talking to each other, they're planning, they're strategizing, they're just interacting in character and having a good time, and they forget that I even exist. I love
Okay.
that.
I like that answer, actually.
Yeah, kind of being a fly in the wall is pretty awesome. Like I really enjoy the parts of the game where you guys are planning for like a big thing you're going to do.
Mhm.
And I try to go out of my way to facilitate those times, and it doesn't always work out. Like I tried really hard to get you guys to think about the encounter with Albion before you tried to kill him. I tried real hard, and you guys just didn't really, and that was okay. Um, you
How
went in.
did you try really hard?
I gave you like 3 days, and I think I asked you every single day. Okay, is there anything you want to do today? Anything at all? You know this information. Is that something that you want to follow up on? I tried, dude. Like I think I even gave you a lead on like bribing the cook to poison him, and you guys didn't do anything with that either. Um, you went and bought the poison and just never followed up on the lead. Um,
Jeez.
I think you guys went and I think you guys went and passed out flyers in like the workers district to like start a union or something. I don't remember exactly what you guys did, but
What?
yeah, I think
That's fantastic.
I think Nick's character tried to start a socialist revolution or something in
Yeah,
3 days.
Oh, that's amazing. Just,
It was
you're
so.
gonna go fight somebody super scary. What do? Workers' rights.
We're gonna seize the means of production. I'm gonna talk to the dock workers about how much they hate getting taxed. And I was just like, what?
I remember that.
Sure, man.
Oh my god.
Like, no, it's great. We'll start a shadow campaign. It's just like, what, dude? Like, you have a meeting with this guy in 3 days. Like, what revolution are you? Anyways, man, it was really fun. As you can tell, I'm crying here. So it was really fun. As far as like watching that kind of stuff unfold, and I really like it when you guys like take time to talk in character amongst yourselves, and really like hash things out. Like I think not even that long ago, you guys had a conversation with like each other about like, okay, what's the actual plan here? Because like Marvin's character had to be brought up to speed, and you guys never really talked to him about what exactly was happening.
Yeah, I feel
Yeah.
like we have a tendency to do that, not just with Marvin's character. I think with just any character that joins us, we just assume that they know what they're getting themselves into.
Oh yeah, none of
Uh,
them do. Um, so that's definitely like I agree with you, Marvin. I think that's a really cool part. I think for me, a lot of the reason that I like it is I like kind of facilitating the storytelling of the game. Like I really enjoy that that part of it, and I'm also a bit of a control freak, so like I find it really difficult to play as a player sometimes because I have a tendency to like want to jump in and like correct rules and things like that, which I spend a lot of energy trying to not do that when I play as a player, but it's something that I have to be conscious to not try and like backseat DM. So
mhm.
so that's part of it too, but a lot of it is the story part of it. That's why I personally enjoy it. Because I really like being able to like reminisce years later, and I know that I've had a hand forming the story that my friends will take with them for a hell of a long time. There are aspects of the campaign, Andrew. I'm sure that you're going to be able to tell for years to come. I know that Marvin has plenty of stories that I've helped shape, even though even though none of my characters were personally there for them. So
Yeah, I tell people all the time how funny I thought it was when Nick like wanted to assert his dominance, shaking that guy's hand. So you made him roll a strength check, and you rolled a natural 20 and crushed the guy's hand.
yeah.
uh,
Um, I think that does kind of bring to the forefront though the idea that like it's okay if you play characters that are just kind of dumb sometimes.
Yeah,
Not to say that like
mhm.
Nick plays a dumb character, he doesn't, but what I mean is that like it's okay to play and not play to optimize your character, because like your build isn't optimal, like not even close. I don't even know if you would know what to do to try and build an optimal character. But I think even in spite of that, like you still have one of the more interesting ones in the group.
yeah. I think that that matters more to me than having like a totally optimal character or like having somebody that can just tear through everything that we fight like it's tissue. Like I think it's more important that to me that I have like an interesting character, a character that can make other players laugh, and yeah, just somebody that can just remain as an interesting part of the story.
Yeah, it goes a really long way. And not that I have like anything against optimized characters. I think that they have their time and their place. But I think when you're playing the game well or with a good group that you really enjoy, when everybody's on the same page, you can have a blast regardless whether your character is really high power build or really low power build. It really just kind of matters the people that you're with.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree with
Absolutely.
that.
So, so yeah, I mean that being the case, I know that we've kind of rambled a little bit on some of those topics there. Marvin, did you have any questions for our guest today?
Oh, I think you've hit on the major ones. Actually, I have one that I've never actually asked anyone before.
Really?
How is it playing with me as another player?
Self-indulgent, but I dig it.
I well, I like playing with you. I feel like you and this probably comes with have playing the game so much before and probably even being a DM, but I feel like you think about things that the rest of us in the party don't think about, like things that we can ask or things that we might want to follow up on, sort of thing. So that's very helpful. Um, it's also like it's also just funny like how you talk. We're like, hey Marvin, here's a bardic inspiration. You're like, thanks.
Yeah.
uh, but uh, but yeah, no, I think that you're a very helpful character to have. your character that we have in our campaign is an interesting character, and yeah, like I said, I think the best thing that you bring to the party is that a lot of things I feel like go over our heads. You make it so it doesn't go over our heads, um, and that
Huh.
makes the campaign a lot easier. Otherwise, we'd probably be struggling more than we already do.
All right. I've literally never gotten to ask any new player that question before, so I really appreciate your answer.
Yeah, no problem. What? Oh no, we do. What do you feel like, Owen? Like, what? How do you enjoy working or like playing with Marvin?
Um, so I'll answer that, but I do want to kind of like summarize. So I guess like in maybe fewer words, Andrew, what you're describing is like more focus and more skepticism. I guess he brings to the campaign, like as a character at least. Um,
Yeah, that's fair.
so which I think is fair, and I think it was one of the reasons why I was really excited to have him join, um, because a lot of the people who are playing don't have a lot of experience, so there's definitely a lot of times where like stuff that I'm trying to seed, you guys just miss or don't follow up on it. So, like the poisoning the councilman. So I think that it's really good to have that that in the party because it means that as a DM, I can be a little bit more subtle with some of the stuff that I want you guys to follow up on. Um, and I know that for the most part, Marvin won't miss it and bring it to the party's attention when the time comes. Um,
Right.
so for me playing with Marvin, I've played with Marvin as co-players. I want to say twice, like 2 or 3 times. I would say because it was what Vane City, Pokemon. I don't think
Saga
we've
edition.
yeah sagas, but outside of that, I don't think we've actually played D&D together because typically I'm DMing when we're in the same room.
Oh, okay.
So, but of the campaigns that I've played where we were both players, I would say that I think that Marvin brings an element of levity to the sessions where he tends to play characters who don't take situations too seriously, which I think for me bounces off rather well because I tend to play very straightforward, like straight serious characters. Um, for that reason. Um, Also because we're like fairly good friends, we tend to build characters who end up getting along fairly well. So so
That's
that's always
true.
been a big element of our storytelling together. So I think that we bounce off each other really well in that respect, and I appreciate having somebody who can flip the switch and go from playing their kind of jokey, hokey, kind of not serious character to like switching gears and playing a serious scene with me. Um, Without necessarily that prompting. Like he gets when I'm trying to do that and doesn't necessarily force my character into situations that are inherently ridiculous. Whereas that's not always the case when you play with somebody who plays not a joke character because I don't think your characters are jokes, but who plays characters who are more prone to like quipping or making jokes or light of the situation, if that makes sense.
Right.
Hmm. That is actually, for the most part, how I feel about playing D&D with you, Owen. Because you'll take my silly little bullshit ideas sometimes and you'll just run with it. Like when we had those abomination children.
Oh, that was really bad. That was a really bad idea.
It really was. And we did it anyways.
We did. I blame Dylan. He shouldn't have allowed it. Um,
No, I'm really glad he did.
I'm happy he did, but he shouldn't have. Um, Gonna have to go, go make penance later. Um,
That was actually also one of the few characters that like took every situation seriously.
yeah,
Because Lila was not a quippy or fun character. She was just like, I have to do this thing. This is my mission. I gotta kill some people right now.
yeah. I mean, and I guess for Andrew, like he doesn't know these characters, so like this was a Star Wars campaign where we were playing, and and I played a Gungan like Jar Jar Binks. Only I was much more competent than that. Um, like really competent. I was basically like an assassin in a lot of ways. Um, So I was a Gungan assassin. He played a human, and we decided they got together at some point.
There was a time skip in the campaign. My character was like, up until this point, her goal was finding her exiled fiance, and then like at some point she gave up on it, and we decided that like the Gungan and this human girl fell in love. It was wild.
Yeah.
And Flink, single biggest regret. Flink let us have these bastard half Gungan, half human abomination children, and it was some shit.
It was wild.
It's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, it's a story. So I mean, there's that at least. But yeah, I guess I don't really get a ton of feedback on my actual role playing as a player, but I'm happy to hear that it's appreciated. I guess in a lot of ways. Sometimes I feel like I play characters who take themselves too seriously, which is maybe not always fun to be around. But like I know Deja was definitely not always fun to play with, which was basically a Vietnam vet Gungan that I played. You're gonna notice a trend here with Star Wars.
The assassin guy was actually the Vietnam War vet's son.
Yeah, who was like conscripted into the Cheddar Monk Society. So my chat's going crazy about this. So, but yeah, yeah,
A bad story.
it was a great story. But yeah, so I mean, like for me at least, I personally tend towards like more serious and melancholy characters because those are aspects of my personality that I tend to emphasize at times. So so yeah, that's what I play.
Still interesting nonetheless. So I did have another question. As far as being a DM, like how far in advance do you plan? So do you kind of have like the next few months as far as sessions go planned out, or do you kind of take it more week by week? Like how do you do it?
So the way that I tend to approach planning is I have a broad strokes plan for where I want the story to go, and usually like the motivations of like the main bad guys outlined. Um, there are sessions where I sit down and I don't have anything necessarily planned. But like right now, for instance, we're at like what I would consider to be getting closer to like the end game of the current arc. So like I have the rest of this dungeon planned and done. So basically, I don't need to do any work on it. Um, the stuff immediately afterward, I have like an outline depending on what you guys do immediately afterwards, and then depending on how much time has elapsed rather from where you guys are right now, and the time that you return to Dega, I have plans for depending on what time frame that is.
Interesting.
But like beyond that, there are too many infinite number of paths that like you guys could take at this point that it's kind of fruitless for me to spend any more energy than like what immediately is coming up and kind of the broad strokes of what else could be going on in the meantime.
Right. Okay.
Um, for when the story was a little bit smaller in scope, I tend to plan just like the next session, and I always kind of try to keep the major NPC players, like the Albions, the Chances. I tend to keep those characters kind of at the forefront over the entirety of the week and plan what their motivations and what things they're going to do are. In different situations, but like as far as like any actual like combat encounter and stuff like that, I tend to only plan that the week of,
Okay.
or sometimes I just make it up
Okay.
on the spot.
Well, sometimes I know that you. I remember one combat in particularly where we were like, uh, we set up like camp on the side of a road or something like that, and you asked us like 4 times before we all decided that we were gonna go to bed. Or like, anything else you want to do? Does anybody want to do anything before you guys go to bed? And you're insinuating that we needed to have somebody to keep watch, and we just all went to bed, and then you had us get attacked by like goblins or something like that. Um, so I'm sure that that obviously wasn't planned. And you, I know you just did that to kind of teach us a lesson, but
There's definitely some like classical conditioning that goes on during these campaigns, I would say. Pavlov would be proud.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
contrary to what I said earlier when I said that you just want to kill us, there are times like that where you really try to give us a chance to do the right thing and we just don't do it.
I think Marvin could probably agree when I say that there's a lot of times like that when you're DMing. Because I think the solution to us is so obvious at times. And
Sometimes, yeah.
as a player, like you guys just are not working with the same information, or you're drawing different conclusions than what we would want you to.
Right.
Um, so it's like there's a lot of instances like that where it's just like, all right, like I can't make them keep watch, but I probably should teach them a lesson on why it's important to do that now when I can't really justify really dangerous enemies around versus later when there are going to be really dangerous enemies. But I tell you what, you've never gone to sleep without someone keeping watch again.
No, never. That never happened again.
Even in your own house.
Yeah.
You were literally home and you still had people keep watch.
Not at my house, though.
To be fair, the city was literally it was in shambles. It was in absolute shambles.
Yeah, I guess prior to that you guys didn't, but you know.
And my house had been broken into. So yeah, I think that was fair in my house particularly, but maybe not so much Marvin's.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is one of my failings as a player, honestly. I always assume my character is safe in their own home.
I think people do that in real life, so I don't think that's a failing of your character so much as just an assumption that most people make.
I mean, out of character as a person, I don't assume I'm safe in my own home.
I mean, I think that in general, when people are at their own home, they assume that they're safer than they actually are. I mean, I'm saying that partly because I just watched the Night Stalker documentary on Netflix, but
Nice.
so like that's like in the forefront of my mind, right? But but yeah, I mean, like at any moment, like someone could break into your house and kill you. It's it's a thing that can happen.
Yep.
Why me particularly though? Like, what do I have to offer to this alleged killer?
The thrill of killing another person.
Okay.
The joy of watching the light leave somebody's eyes. I mean, what?
I mean, you can't really do that if they're sleeping. But yeah, I get what you're saying. So that could be another character.
Just a murderer.
I mean, most of them are, right? Like,
I
I think
mean,
that it's a trope, the murder hobo.
yeah, I mean, like, imagine if how many people Oliver's killed or had a hand in killing got leaked to the Bramble Branch media. Then
A
what happens
lot.
to his stardom? Yeah.
A lot of people is what it is. Like, the fact that you compartmentalize that as a player is really funny. Like, characters in general. It's like, how many people has Gris killed at this point? A dozen, at least?
Actually, not that many, I don't think.
That's fair. Gris is probably a poor example. But Ollie's at least killed, like, what? Maybe, like, 24 different sentient people? Creatures? Like,
I
it's a
mean, at
lot.
least they all had it coming. It's not like I just, it was Joe Schmo who was a good day to day guy and just got killed for no reason.
It was always self-defense, but, most of the time. So yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely something to kind of keep in mind. So I guess while we still have you, as a new player, I'm kind of curious. When was it that you decided that like I'm gonna keep coming back to this every week? Because I know obviously that first session was a hard sell, and I'm honestly not sure if it was done if you were like hooked in by the second session either. So like I'm kind of curious for you. Like, was it that you just kind of kept doing it and eventually you just realize that you were enjoying it, or was there like a moment where you're like, after that session, you're like, no, this was awesome. I want to do this again.
Yeah, I think it was. I think it was more the former. I don't particularly remember, if I'm being honest with you.
Mhm.
Like I don't remember much about the first session. I don't remember, like maybe if you reminded me, I'd be like, oh yeah, I remember, but I don't remember like anything about the second session. Um, but so yeah, I don't know what it was. Like I think it took me a little while to get settled in and to be sold entirely on it. But I think once I got more of a like a grasp of what the game was and just all the different things that we could do, I think I eventually got settled in. So yeah, I don't know there was a particular session that we had or particular instance, but I think once I just familiarized myself more with the game, I realized like, yeah, this is fun. I want to keep doing this.
So I guess what would be your advice for people who are like, maybe interested or maybe have heard of it before but don't know where to start? What would be your advice to those people?
That's interesting because I'm not entirely sure. I got lucky with you just having you as a friend and inviting me. So it's not like every day that you would have just an experienced person that's also going to be your DM introducing that to you. But I don't know. I mean, the internet's a thing, Reddit. Just try to maybe meet people and that know more what they're doing and get involved that way. I think would be the best way to go about it. Um, and then just I mean, if that's an option for you already, just getting involved in it, getting your feet wet, and playing more and just getting used to it. It's just like anything. You gotta do it, get a feel for it, and then you get used to it. Really see I can't really see like too many people having a bad time playing it. It's a lot of fun because again, like I was before I got involved, I had no idea what it was, and then once it was kind of explained to me, I still didn't particularly feel like it was something that was down my alley. And then once I got more of the hang of it, it's a fun game. I definitely think it's something that pretty much anybody could have fun doing. So just I think finding the people is the main thing.
Hmm. I like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
I think. Mhm.
even so, like I found like I had different friends like tell me that they wanted to play and like our game was full, and I would imagine like finding a DM is the hardest part because I had a buddy, like I had a few buddies in the same friend group saying they wanted to play, and only one of them had ever DM'd, but he said he didn't want to DM, but like if we started a campaign, he might DM just to so that we could have a campaign. But yeah, I think that's the hardest part. But again, I think if you can just surround yourself around the people that are interested, and I think that's in that I think that's the biggest thing.
So I actually have a question for you, and I just want to say thanks, Viper, for the host. But so Andrew, you mentioned that you had other friends who would be willing to, who were looking to play. Would you ever consider DMing?
I I've thought about that in the past. I don't know that I have enough creativity and that sort of thing to be a DM. Um, I again, I'm sure it's just like anything. You just kind of have to do it and you get better at it. But I don't particularly think I'd be any good at that kind of thing. Um, because again, like I already had enough of a time trying to figure out how to play my character. I wouldn't know how to. I don't think that I'd be good enough in like creating a world around everybody's characters.
Well, one thing that you might not know, but that's not actually a requirement to DM. They do sell what they call like modules, which are basically kind of like published works from the company that makes the game, where they basically just give you everything. They give you the story, they give
Interesting.
you the fights, the maps. It's just everything published in a book. So if that kind of stuff is like daunting for you, you could just, pick up the book and just run that and, kind of improvise as that goes.
That's fair. Well, yeah, I didn't know that. That kind of changes things. So maybe if I ran one of those, that'd be fun. Like it'd be fun playing as like the opposition, like the creatures that the the campaign is fighting, or playing
Mhm.
as the NPCs. I'm sure. Yeah, I think that it was that would be the most like daunting to me is just trying to create a real world around the players. So maybe given that, I might consider it.
Nice.
Yeah, I think that like DMing to me is one of those things where it sounds like it's a lot more work than it actually is. Like, don't get me wrong, I've definitely spent a lot of hours like preparing games and preparing fights and stuff like that. Um, but there are a lot of weeks where I don't do very much prepping at all, and it goes just fine. You guys have a great time, generally speaking.
Have you ever run one of those where like what you were just telling me, where everything's already kind of set up for you?
So I've never actually personally run a module. Marvin, have you?
Um, Technically yes, but it actually only lasted maybe like 20 minutes of me running the module, and then I was like, okay, I'm gonna take this off these rails real quick.
What was the module supposed to be like?
Um, Honestly, I don't even remember. I
So
couldn't even begin to tell you. I don't even remember which module it was.
so I've actually played in quite a few modules now, like as a player. Because one thing that they have is they have what they call the Adventure League, which is like different hobby shops will host like recurring weekly D&D sessions. Um, and they're running modules basically. And so you can kind of go and play with people that you may not necessarily know. And then that's a way that some people get introduced to the hobby. So I know that
Mhm.
like Tate's locally used to do that. So I've played Adventure League at Tate's a number of times at the local hobby shop, and they were running. Oh God, what was the campaign? Strahd, I think it was. Maybe it was like Barovia. There was like Murder House, I think it was. So like there was that campaign, and then for my Monday campaign that I play in as a player, we started with Lost Mines of Phandelver, and then we moved to the Ghost of Saltmarsh, and we only just finished that, and now we're on to like a custom element of the story that's focusing more on our backstories than a pre-scripted module. But those are actually really good jumping off points because if you get a good module to start with, what you can end up doing, Andrew, is instead of you could run the module from front to finish. When you finish the module, you have a party of 4 level 5 characters who've fought together, maybe have developed a backstory or rapport, and you could just run the next story. You could pick up another module and say, all right, your players traveled for 6 weeks or whatever, and now you roll into this town, and now we're playing this story. And then you can have them continue on that path. And even though you're playing the same module as, other people do, because you don't know how those players are going to interact, you end up with a very different story at the end of it.
That's
Hmm.
fair. What was it you said you played locally with people you didn't know? I guess like I know at the beginning I didn't know anybody but you, but what was it like not having anything to kind of like bind that you were just playing with a bunch of strangers? What was that like?
Um, so I don't know if I mentioned this before, but the first time I've ever actually played D&D was with a bunch of strangers at a convention. Um, so it was weirdly liberating because in some ways, like you get to sit down to the table, and the people at the table don't know you as a person. So to me at least, it made me feel very free to express my character however I wanted to, within the bounds of reason, and really just kind of lean into that. Um, Whereas I think sometimes when you play with people that you know very well, there's that inclination to kind of joke around with them and not focus on the story. I think for me, it made me focus a lot more on staying in character, engaging with the story, things like that. Because I don't know the people at the table, so I'm not really engaging with them as people all that often. Um, so much as I'm engaging with their characters, um, in that respect, at least during the gameplay. after a couple of weeks, I got to know some of the people who were playing in the group a little bit more frequently. But the way that Adventure League is set up, you're not even necessarily playing with the same characters each week. Um, so like it could be a totally different group that you sit down to the table with, depending on how it goes. Um, but there were aspects of it that I really liked. The thing that I didn't like about Adventure League was that the focus was very much on the module, not on the characters. And I think you probably get this by now, but I really enjoy leaning into the characters when I play D&D, like the player characters, their backstories, their motivations, and how those things inform the decisions that they make later on. Whereas like the Adventure League is a lot more focused on like we're running this module, you guys are heroes that are running in to save the day, and who your characters were prior to this module starting are not really important. The things that you did prior to don't really matter all that much, and that's just kind of what it is.
Okay. Interesting.
So I think for that campaign, I ran a sorcerer who is a painter, but like a Geiger-esque kind of painter, where like I painted like some really horrific shit. So like I think we like walked into a place. It was like a graveyard, but there was like a stack of bodies or whatever that was just like piled up on the side because like the village was slaughtered, and I spent like I think 3 hours painting it or something. Like that's what my character did while everybody was looking for clues. So
I love that for you. That's amazing.
so so you know you can kind of just like run with the trope sometimes, and sometimes that works, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I think it's really good for meeting people in your area that are involved in the hobby. So I think that it's really good for that. Um, Not literally now, because of course you should be socially distancing and staying home and quarantining so that we can eventually get back to our regular lives, and wearing a mask and such. But outside of that, during the before times, it was a really good way to kind of introduce yourself to people who are interested in that hobby, um,
Mm-hmm.
and people who are actually competent DMs sometimes, um, to kind of learn how to play the game, how they DM the game, and it's a good way to kind of get introduced and immersed in that space, I guess.
Interesting. I like that.
So yeah, lots of resources out there, you know. Um, how about you, Marvin? Have you ever played Adventure League?
I actually have not. I considered DMing Adventure League.
Mm-hmm.
Tate's was really hurting for DMs for a little while. I just at the time I couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
My work let out 10, well, half an hour before I needed to be there to set up. But like I just couldn't swing it at the time.
It's tough,
Uh, but no, I've never played Adventure League. I've never actually wanted to play Adventure League.
yeah.
Um,
Luxury of knowing people, I guess, who are running personal games.
yeah, I've never had a shortage of games I could play in, so I've never cared to try Adventure League. And like this is not meant to be a dig at everyone who plays Adventure League, but some of the people there are kind of trash.
You know, I know
Not trash
exactly
at
what you're talking
D&D,
about.
trash people.
Yeah.
And definitely not even like close to the majority,
Mm.
but the ones who are really ruin it for a lot of people.
In what ways are they trash people?
Um, just generally not being like nice to people.
Or
Um,
cooperative.
yeah, very uncooperative with the DMs, or if the trash person is the DM, they're not cooperative with the players. Um, one of the DMs that used to run a game at Tate's, um, he was just like super misogynistic, and he made every female player who ended up in his game just stop coming back. Like some of the people at Adventure League just made me not want to be at Adventure League. Um, and like it's not Adventure League's fault. but it is the only place where I would have ever had to interact with those people, so I just didn't.
That's
Yeah,
fair.
yeah. I think that yeah, Bastion says that's horrible.
Oh yeah, it's
I,
awful.
yeah, I think that like you can kind of curb that a little bit by helping the store have a better culture. But at the end of the day, like if the store isn't willing to help facilitate a safe place for those players to come and congregate and play, like the people that you want to be there rather, then you're gonna eventually get those elements of the store that are not savory. And the problem is that because a lot of times people who have trash people, right, as a colloquialism, I guess, trash people tend to get kicked out of personal games because people won't put up with that shit for a really long period of time, um,
Hmm.
or at least they shouldn't. And if you're playing with a toxic person, you should generally try and curb the behavior. And if they can't change or won't, then you should just remove them from the campaign, um, and possibly from your friend circle entirely. So eventually, it kind of becomes a hub for those people who maybe don't have places to play because other people have cut them from their game for one reason or another. That's not every Adventure League, mind you. Your mileage may vary, but I think that that's probably an element of like public gaming like that you're gonna run into from time to time.
People are
Yeah.
trash.
Yeah, I mean, there's
Except for
not,
the people who are watching this podcast.
yeah, or listening to it. Um, so, but like that's the thing is like, obviously, you Andrew as a new player, I like to think that I did a good job kind of facilitating your introduction to the game because you're still playing 4 years later. But there's a lot of like DM horror stories out there, that like you wouldn't believe, and definitely there's a lot of people where like if that is your introduction to the game, that could turn you off to it forever. um,
Yep.
so um,
Yeah, that's fair.
Marvin, do you have any DM horror stories that you want to share?
Oh boy. Well, I had this one DM. His name is Owen. Um,
All
and
right, all right.
King Flink, he's a monster, and Bastion, he's the worst of them all. Let me tell you. And I'm really glad you're all here to hear this.
It's perfect. Flink says DM horror stories not involving him specifically. I appreciate that he's self-aware enough to know that he's probably the source of at least a couple of those stories, but no,
um,
I wouldn't
I
call
don't
you out on that specifically. I would talk to you in person about that first. Um,
I don't actually have any horror stories. I've had some really good DMs. Um, I the, the closest thing I have to a horror story is DMs who have never gotten a campaign to last more than one session ever. That's the closest thing I've got to a horror story. And
man,
even
sick
then,
brag.
like, huh?
Sickest of brags, man.
I mean, yeah, that's good. DMs are hard to find, and I've been very fortunate in my career as a player.
I have not. I have not. Um, so,
Oh, listen, I know you have not been fortunate. I know some of those people. Let me stop.
um, okay, so I'll share a couple of DM horror stories, and I think the key like common denominator here is taking away player um um what's the word I'm looking for?
Agency.
Yeah, thank you. It was an A. Taking away
Gotcha.
player agency is a big no-no for me. Like telling a player their character does a thing is problematic in a lot of ways to me. Um, like you can do it sometimes for like artistic license, but you can cross that line for sure. Um, or so like that's part of it. Or like having DMs where the player's actions either have no consequence or are constantly undermined or outshone by the NPCs in those situations. So, story for the former. Um, I played in a couple of sessions with a DM, and it was a situation where I was still like I didn't have a group here. I was looking for an opportunity to kind of like meet new people, play as a player because I don't usually get to do that. And it was during that first session with that group where one of the players had a disagreement with the DM about like a particular ruling or about whether or not they'd be able to find a thing in town. And the DM said like, okay, well your character stands in front of the fountain with their head, looking at the clouds, drinking rainwater for the next 5 hours. And I was just like, wait, what? Like, no, he doesn't. Like, I mean, it wasn't my character in this particular instance, but there was another, it was another player's character, and like, he was clearly not having a good time at that point because he was basically just told your character has to, shut up and stay out of the way for the next, couple of character interactions, and didn't get to do the thing that he wanted to. And I'm just like, I don't want to play in a group where that's the way that he resolves conflicts at the table.
Yeah, it's not very ideal at all.
No, it's not.
Yeah. So I think that like if you're a DM, like things to keep in mind is to try and avoid taking away player agency in that way, and that there's always a productive way to resolve conflicts at the table. And generally speaking, if you're the DM, try to keep the game moving. Don't dwell on like a ruling thing too long. You can always go back later and fix it if you need to. And then another horror story that like, it's something that comes up periodically depending on the DM, but um, the idea that like you don't want NPCs stealing the thunder of the player characters too frequently. It's okay to have NPCs that are stronger than the players are, and you can even have those NPCs be friendly and helpful, right? But you shouldn't put your players in situations where those NPCs are becoming the heroes instead of the players are. Unless that's something that the whole group has agreed to prior to the game starting. So I have for instance, this was the first campaign that I played in as a player, long running campaign or whatever. And we went through the whole campaign, gathered all the magical items for the ritual to save it, and we did the ritual and it wasn't working. And then an NPC walked up and then completed the last bit of the ritual and he saved the day instead.
That's great.
Like, what?
Just thanks for doing all the work, guys.
Yeah.
He didn't even do anything like different. Like literally it was just like, oh, he just like pushed the sword into the pedestal a little bit more. Like
That's
really?
fantastic.
Like we just didn't push it in hard enough? Like what? No. Shut up, Flank.
Were you pissed about that, Owen?
Yeah, I was. I'm actually not friends with this person anymore.
Oh Lord.
For a lot of reasons, but like that's one of the red flags, right? And like I'm generally a fairly forgiving person, but like this is somebody that I've totally cut out of my life at this point, because they're just a toxic individual. That being said, I think that when you're looking at like the things that DM did, other instances, right? I played, as I had mentioned, I think in our last game or whatever, I played, or yesterday or whatever, I played a 𝐓𝐴, which is like a bug person with 4 arms, with that was allowed to dual wield longbows. So basically, I could make multiple ranged attacks with a longbow in my offhand, basically. So like my whole character concept is basically ranged machine gunning, for lack of a better way to put it, right? So I'm like, all right, this is cool. Like I have like a +30 to my jump modifier because in 3.5 edition, 𝐓𝐴 have a +30 naturally to their jump modifier. So like my standing jump was like 15 feet or something. So like my standard go-to was look for high ground, jump into a tree, jump onto a wall, and then just machine gun stuff from like a relatively safe vantage point. And there was a part during the campaign where we're like fighting off zombies or whatever, and there's like a horde that's coming, so I'm like machine gunning zombies here or there or whatever. What happens? A gnome NPC literally rolls up and unveils a chain gun that he invented. a fucking chain gun, and completely does my job. I was expected to jump into the chain gun and mow down things with the chain gun instead. Like, as a DM, this is totally missing the mark on what I, as the 𝐓𝐴 dual-wielding longbow guy, want to do.
He rolls up with a chain gun.
So
That's
like,
fantastic. I'm gonna be real honest with you. That's the best kind of dick move.
like it's such a outlandishly bad idea as a DM to do this, right? Such an outlandishly bad. Like imagine looking at your party, right? That would be analogous to me looking at the party right now, Andrew, and saying, you know what you guys need? You guys need to get into a situation where you need to have a musical number to really impress this NPC, and you just botch it entirely, and then fucking Mariah Carey walks on stage and just blows them away.
Yo, that'd be great. Can we get Mariah Carey for this campaign?
No, no, we
Are
cannot.
you sure?
I'm not tweeting her, so you can tweet her if you'd like. So
So that's the best kind of dick move.
so so like you know don't make NPCs that outshine your players, right?
All the time. Once in a while, it's cool, but like if every session somebody shows up and they're just like, I'm better than you and there's nothing you can do about it, or like at the very end of the campaign, none of your players feel like they actually accomplished anything because
They didn't need to
you
be
know
there.
the level 20 NPC showed up and did the work for them. It's not fun.
No, it's not. Because like you want your players to feel like they were of consequence, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And like in that moment, when I'm the guy who's standing there watching the NPC complete the ritual, who's fucking Hodor because he only has one line. That was the best part. It was fucking Hodor. Um, um, I'm not kidding. He only said his name the entire fucking campaign.
That's
Like,
fantastic.
okay, like fucking Hodor saved the day, I guess, which he did in the books as well. But the point is that was frustrating because like I just spent 6 months playing this campaign and I basically wasn't needed when it came down to the brass tacks, right? I'm playing my 𝐓𝐿𝐷𝐞𝐞 archer and like there are just chain guns, I guess. I don't need to be here. Like the one thing I'm good at, don't need to be here, right? Um, so
Yeah, I don't know how that guy thought, or like how that person thought that'd be a good idea.
because it wasn't about making a good experience for the players for him. It was about him having a good time. And like I wish I could say that without joking, but like that's what it came down to, right? Because even when this person played as a player in my campaign, they were probably the most disruptive character I've ever had to deal with on a regular basis.
Right.
Yeah,
Where
that
it's
tracks.
where like this is somebody who like during a campaign that like KGB Bunny ran in chat, like straight up assassinated like the high queen or whatever of like some kingdom and tried to impersonate them. Like, okay. And then threw a hissy fit when, they rolled up, with was it Lanterns of True Seeing or something? Like, what? How could they have that? That's like a 9th level spell. It's like, dude, like, it's a queen of a large kingdom. Yeah, they're gonna have Lanterns of True Sight. Sure, man. Like, you did a dumb thing. Like, what were you expecting would happen?
Do you expect that everything is your level in this world? Because that's not how life works.
Well, and it's just like, it's more so just like that sense of entitlement, right? Where it's like, as a player, he wants things to go his way every single time. As a DM, he wants things to go his way every single time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just not how you do collaborative storytelling.
Yeah.
And again, not to make this like ragging on that particular individual for too long, but like those are definitely some like DM horror stories you can run into where it's like, yikes.
Yeah, yikes indeed.
Like I outright quit playing D&D for years because of this, right? So it definitely is something where you can definitely not luck out and end up interacting with people who are just not super savory. But I think what's important is that there's always going to be a better group somewhere if that's your experience. So if anybody's watching this and doesn't still play play D&D because of one of those experiences, to give it another shot. play with different people, meet different people. You can have a fun time. It's just about, running into the people that are going to want to help you do that.
That's really good advice.
Didn't you have somebody in one of your campaigns when that like went to an NPC and asked like what class they were or like what rank they were?
I don't know, Bastion. Is that what happened?
He just left. He just messaged me on Facebook that he had to go.
Should let him know that he got name dropped. So yes, I did have that happen. Metagaming is something that is tough for new players to not do, but I think it's a really helpful skill to kind of keep in mind, to not make decisions with information that your character doesn't have. So like that would be an example of metagaming. The character doesn't understand the idea of like a class race system or a level system. Your characters don't have levels in the story. You as the players know that. So when you as a player say, hey, I'm going to have, Ollie walk up to this NPC at Ral Zarek and say, hey, Ral, what's your level? Are you feeling like a level 17 or like he's gonna look at you like you're dumb or crazy or both.
Yeah.
Or in this
Always
particular
both.
instance, I was feeling very malicious, and I think I docked him a level or something, because it was dumb. But
That's good shit.
so I think that like being mindful not to metagame too is super helpful. And I think that generally our party is pretty good at not doing that. Generally.
Yeah. I will sometimes say stupid shit as Ollie, like, you're like, oh, you just lost 15 HP. I'm like, oh, you fucking made me lose 15 HP.
But, like, that's inconsequential joking, right? That's not like when you... Like, that's not informing your decision-making, necessarily.
Right.
So I think it's a bit of a difference, right? Like, if I make a joke, like, it's like, oh, how are you feeling? Like, I'm feeling at, like, out of a, 1 out of a, 236, I'm feeling at about a 15 HP wise. So,
which is a classic D&D joke, by the way. Classic.
Yeah. So yeah. That being said, I just checked the time here. We're actually running a bit over on what we normally do. So I guess it makes up for starting a bit late. Any closing thoughts for you guys before we close out for the night?
Long live D&D.
Yeah. I mean, the game has been going on for a number of years now, and it probably isn't going to stop anytime soon.
One could say it's going to go on forever at this point.
Yeah. Even if Wizards goes bankrupt. So, all right. Well, with that, thank you so much, everybody, for joining for the evening. Please, follow our channels. I'm /Vladdviever on Twitch here. Marvin is, well, what's your handle again?
/Tayogetsu.
Yep.
And you can find us on Twitter with those same ads.
Yep, as listed on screen right now. If you are looking to catch up, you can catch the videos on YouTube, of course, at /Vladdviever, my YouTube channel, where I have all the VODs from this uploaded in a playlist there, so you can catch up on that. We will be returning again next Thursday at 9 o'clock Eastern to continue in. If you are interested in joining our our little thing here, feel free to join the Discord channel. I'll have a link in the description on the YouTube channel, and there's currently a link in chat as well if you're looking to join. If you want to join us at some point as a guest on the show, or want to just ask us questions and stuff, reach out during the week and we'll see what we can do.
Thanks for coming out, everybody.
Good night, everyone. Peace.